Hello and welcome to Illumination Podcast with Nick and Kisma. I'm Nick, and this week we are diving into part 3 of our series inspired by the 4 agreements. This one, pretty big deal, everybody. Don't make assumptions.
Hello and welcome to Illumination Podcast with Nick and Kisma, bringing you ancient wisdom for modern day success so that you can have the mindset to get your life and business set.
As always, thank you for tuning in. And if you're new to the podcast, take a quick second to hit the subscribe button in iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. If you want to get the inside info for this and every episode, as well as some free gifts, go to illuminationacademy.net/podcasts. And now let's dive in to get your mindset for your life and business set. Well, hey there, Kisma.
Well, hello. What are you assuming right now?
What? I assume a lot of things. A lot happens inside of my head.
Of yours,
it does.
Sometimes you don't use your words.
I try. I really do. I really do.
Everyone will be like, Nick will start to say something, then there'll be silence. And I'm like, am I supposed to read your mind right now?
I can feel myself stalling out sometimes too.
It's like chug.
No, it's not like that. It's like,
Sure?
It's not chugging. It's like so much is going on inside that there's just like an overload.
Yeah.
And then it's like it just drops out for a second. Like my voice drops out.
It's like the circuit breaker went.
Yeah. And then, but it's still happening inside of my head. My mind goes really fast.
Mm-hmm,
and then,
it does.
And then like I'm 5 steps ahead and then I'm trying to back up to try and explain something. And it's just like,
Yeah,
it shorts out sometimes. I do it on the podcast. I catch myself and I'm like, oh, dead air,
No.
And I hear
good.
that.
We need a little breath in between.
I think that's really good. I've listened to a lot of podcasts where they allow that space and I really enjoy it.
I appreciate it. We don't edit out the ums and the space. And like, we're just having a conversation here. And this conversation is a good one.
It's a good one and it's an important one. Last week was amazing.
Yeah. The 4 agreements. Last week we talked about don't take things personally, everybody.
Don't take things personally.
And this week, the 3rd agreement is don't make assumptions. I'm telling you, I think
I'm in trouble.
I think we all are, right? The #human is we make assumptions. Somebody gives an evil eye at the store and all of a sudden we think they don't like us, or someone doesn't respond to a text and we're making an assumption that they're breaking up with us. Or, it goes on and on. I wonder where and when as a human being did we learn this behavior of making assumptions?
Well, I think part of it is a survival instinct.
Yeah.
Where you when you're operating in the world, like you have to, there's certain, you can't be responsible for so many decisions, right? So we take our past experiences and then we project that into the future,
mm-hmm.
and it helps to make the decision-making process more efficient
mm-hmm.
for ourselves. And I think another part of it too is storytelling is hardwired into
the stories,
the human psyche. And when, when we make assumptions, we're basically storytelling.
Yeah.
Because like you said, that's such a great
mm-hmm.
example. Somebody gives you that look and then we're trying to figure out.
Or they don't respond to a text or.
Right. All of a sudden we're just generating this whole story inside
mm-hmm.
of our heads about it, which may or may not be anywhere near the truth,
I do that with my CPA who responds in all caps. It really annoys me.
Oh, seriously?
And I'm like, I start to go down the assumption that she's mad at me. I'm like, I'm not going to take that personally.
Good for you. Way to go.
Because she writes back in all caps. But let me read a few segments from this chapter from Don Miguel Ruiz's book, The 4 Agreements. The 3rd agreement is don't make assumptions. We have the tendency to make assumptions about everything. The problem with making assumptions is that we believe they are the truth. That's the problem, right?
Yeah.
We believe they are the truth. We could swear they are real. We make assumptions about what others are doing or thinking. We take it personally. Then we blame them and react by sending emotional poison with our word. That is why whenever we make assumptions, we're asking for problems. We make an assumption, we misunderstand, and we take it personally, and we end up creating a whole big drama for nothing. All the sadness and drama you have lived in your life was rooted in making assumptions and taking things personally. This is a very bold statement, by the way.
All the sadness and drama.
All the sadness. All the drama you have lived in your life was rooted in making assumptions and taking things personally. I think it's worth the reflection, though, everyone, to go back. Like, what's the most recent episode of upset, of disappointment, of drama, of sadness, of agitation? And ask yourself, did I, number one, take things personally? Number two, did I make an assumption? Don't make it wrong if you did. Just be like, wow, when we can look at how it's tethered to the drama and the upsets, that's a great self-coaching tool, actually.
Yeah, it's really, really effective. All the sadness and drama. All of the sadness and drama.
Take a moment to consider the truth of the statement we just did. The whole war of control between humans is about making assumptions and taking things personally. Our whole dream of hell is based on that.
We believe it to be true. Like, I want to circle back to that part really quickly, because that's where we trip up, right? So I talked about that survival instinct where we project things out, we make assumptions about the way that certain things are, and that can be really effective. But if you have in your mind that that's true, just by virtue of making the assumption, that's where you're on the wrong side of it.
Right.
The right side of that, like, sure, we have to do that. Like, there's certain things that I have to assume that the roof is not going to fall down on my head right now, right? Just because if I go around.
We have faith it won't.
We have faith that that it won't. But if we go around thinking and worrying about that all the time, like, that's just that much more head chatter. So we make the assumption, but we recognize also that, hey, that's not necessarily true. And I may need to take care of the house, right? Make sure that the roof is well tended, blah, blah. Like, there's these things that we put into the checklist, right? That help us to we're making the assumption, but it helps us to put it into real world action. It's the assuming that it's true. That's the real key point to me.
Again, when we go back to the foundation of Vedanta philosophy, I remember our first trip to India, Swamiji says, don't assume what I'm saying is true. Question everything.
Yep.
All right. Don Miguel goes on to say, we create a lot of emotional poison just by making assumptions and taking it personally, because usually we start gossiping about our assumptions.
No.
Remember, gossiping is the way we communicate to each other in the dream of hell and transfer poison to one another. Because we are afraid to ask for clarification, we make assumptions and believe we are right about the assumptions. Then we defend our assumptions and try to make someone else wrong. It is always better to ask questions than to make an assumption, because assumptions set us up for suffering.
There's so much in there to talk about.
Oh my gosh.
So
we're afraid to ask for clarification. Because we might take it personally.
Well, we might take it personally. We might be wrong.
Right?
So I see the need to be right playing a big role in here, because we have to defend that, right? And if we ask a question or get curious about something, that need to be right is challenged, and we might wind up being wrong. We might look foolish or stupid. Yeah. They might think something about us, and then we're going to take it personally.
Right. So he says, then we defend our assumptions and try to make someone else wrong. So then we're putting out this yucky energy.
Right. The defensiveness. Defensiveness is a real problem. And I see this one a lot of times with the assumption, the making of assumptions is dealing, like, there's an underlying issue around safety and security, where I need to assume these things because that's gonna prop up this idea about what I have about what's right, what's the way that things are supposed to be, so that I can be safe in my little bubble, right? And when that gets challenged outside of that, then there's drama and there's defensiveness, because we need to protect that.
Right.
Pretty interesting. Like,
it's
you can see how it just fuels on itself too.
Yeah. It is always better to ask questions than to make an assumption, because assumptions set us up for suffering. The art of asking a question, again, when we get to that neutral state, that centered awareness, that objectivity, we just ask a question. Hey, I'm curious. I just need clarification on something. Did you mean this or did you mean that? But not doing it, trying to impose our own belief on someone, just asking the question for clarification.
Yeah. It's really powerful. That and reflective listening. Like you can even preempt that with reflective listening. That's what they call, or active listening, excuse me.
Active and reflective. Like, hey, I just want to make sure I'm hearing you right.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. This is a good one. The big mitote in the human mind creates a lot of chaos, which causes us to misinterpret everything and misunderstand everything. Do you want to talk about this mitote?
Mitote. How it's defined. Let me find the definition.
That's
here.
a good one. It reminds me of Pote from Queen of the South.
Oh, I took it off my browser. Basically,
it was 1,000 voices in the head of chaos.
It's the chaos in the head. It's the 1,000 voices all talking at the same time to be heard inside of your head.
Guys, we can't do that anymore.
We can't do that. But remember in the last episode, we were talking about don't take it don't even take the voices inside of your head personally.
Right. There's too many of them, number one.
Right, there's too many.
It's too much going on.
Too much.
Just get quiet so that mitote, those 1,000 chaotic voices in the human mind, creates a lot of chaos, which causes us to misinterpret everything and misunderstand everything. We only see what we want to see and hear what we want to hear. We don't perceive things the way they are. We have the habit of dreaming with no basis in reality. We literally dream things up in our imaginations because we don't understand something. We make an assumption about the meaning, and when the truth comes out, the bubble of our dream pops, and we found out it was not what we thought it was at all.
Mm-hmm. I have to be, I just want to talk about my own personal experience with this. Like there's kind of when I'm learning something new, there's this funny part of me. Like I have to consciously stay curious about things because I'll hear something that maybe I don't understand, but I kind of think it means this. Right. And so I'll go with that. Right. And it's like, oh, I don't want to keep going back over everything. You know, like maybe that'll be fleshed out a little bit further on in the lesson or something like that. And oftentimes it is, right? It's just my own part. So I have to go through this process when I'm hearing something to be really mindful about not assuming, right? I can make I guess that's called a hypothesis. All right, well, this is my working idea about what that means, but like, let's wait until some more information comes in, because I found that if I lock into that and be like, oh, it means this, it's super confusing down the line.
Right.
Right. And like learning, to me, obviously, is a lot to do with just curiosity.
Right.
But it's really being in the curious mind while we're doing it.
Right.
But in school, we're not taught that way.
No.
Right? It's like, you got to get this answer and you got to get it right now.
Exactly.
And if you get it wrong, you're getting the F.
And you're bad.
Yeah.
He goes on to say an example. You're walking in the mall and you see a person you like. That person turns to you and smiles and then walks away. You can make a lot of assumptions just because of this one experience. With these assumptions, you can create a whole fantasy, and you really want to believe this fantasy and make it real. A whole dream begins to form from your assumptions, and you can believe, oh, this person really likes me. In your mind, a whole relationship begins from that. Maybe even get married in this fantasy land, but the fantasy is in your mind, in your personal dream. Making assumptions in our relationships is really asking for problems. Often we make the assumption that our partners know what we think and that we don't have a say what we want. We assume that we are going to do what we want because they know us so well. If they don't do what we assume they should do, we feel so hurt and say, you should have known. I don't ever say you should have known, but I do wonder why you're not reading my mind at times, Nick, and doing what I'm like telling you to do telepathically.
Hey, a tricky part with that one is assuming that you told them once, so they should just automatically get it.
Yeah, I do that, but you should. Just kidding. Not really.
Just kidding. Not really. You heard it here, folks.
Yeah.
I mean, we both do that. Like I told you,
Yeah.
Um,
And I'm like, no, you didn't. You're like, yes, you did. I'm like, no, you didn't.
yeah, or you did, and it's like it just didn't really land the way that it needed to land, to take action on it. Yeah. So just I guess a public service announcement, everybody, is sometimes you might need to tell them a few times.
Yeah. Another example, you decide to get married and you make the assumption that your partner sees marriage the same way you do.
Whoa.
Oh, bad. Then you live together and you find out this is not true. This creates a lot of conflict, but you still don't try to clarify your feelings about marriage. The husband comes home from work and the wife is mad, and the husband doesn't know why. Maybe it's because the wife made an assumption. Without telling him what she wants, she makes an assumption that he knows her so well, that he knows what she wants, as if he can read her mind. She gets so upset because he fails to meet her expectations. Making assumptions in relationships leads to a lot of fights, a lot of difficulties, a lot of misunderstandings with people we supposedly love. I want to say one of the things that is so detrimental in a relationship is when we assume how the other person feels. And we say that, and we're putting our, again, opinion on somebody else of how they feel. We're making that assumption. It really is treading in someone else's human jurisdiction. Now, of course, if you're on the other side of it and you don't take it personally, then it's not such a big deal. But it can be intrusive, and you can end up creating this whole reality of a marriage because you're manifesting from an assumption.
Yeah, it can become like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you're feeling this way. Like, I can tell that you're angry. And you're like, I'm not really angry. But no, you're angry. Like I can tell when you're angry. And it's like, well, now I'm angry, right?
Right.
So it kind of can create that. But I think, again, that's the funny part with these things is there's subtle layers to it in practical application, because you are really perceptive to me.
Yep, I know. I know what's going on, folks. Just about every minute of every day. No, kidding.
You are really perceptive, but sometimes if you tell me how I'm feeling, like that doesn't always land, in a great way.
I understand that.
So it's kind of funny, but it also, I can say for myself, I don't know if everybody's like this, but if you ask or say, are you feeling this way, or what's going on? Sometimes it kind of jars me out of it enough to be like, oh, I would just ignore it. I'm kind of going out my day, maybe that's a guy thing. Maybe it's just a me thing. I don't know. But I'm just ignoring it. And then you draw some attention to it. And I'm like, oh, yeah, well, actually, all of a sudden it's like, oh, yeah.
Well, I think the cue here is it's so helpful, everyone, especially in any kind of relationship, when you have an assumption rather than put it on the other person, ask for permission. Say, hey, I have a quick question. Can I ask you now? I'm noticing this and I don't want to make an assumption. Like that's really taking ownership.
Yeah.
And really finding that permission, because we do want to understand, other people in our lives. We want to make, if there's something germinating in your head that someone's mad at you or whatever, say, hey, is it okay if we talk about something? I have a question. Sure, what? Well, I had this, I was wondering if, or you don't want to tell them you're making up this whole story that they hate you. But you see the difference between going on with your assumption and the energy frequency of that and creating this whole manifestation that very well could, he doesn't talk about how you can make it a reality because you're thinking about it so much.
Right.
Compared to, hey, I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm noticing this. I don't want to assume. That's a very powerful way to approach another person. I don't want to assume, but I'm just wondering.
Slowing down to communicate that way, and I think is just so powerful.
Yeah.
It's so amazing.
Noted. Okay, let's touch on this. It's very interesting how the human mind works. We have the need to justify everything, to explain and understand everything in order to feel safe. We have millions of questions that need answers because there are so many things that the reasoning mind cannot explain. It is not important if the answer is correct, just the answer itself makes us feel safe. This is why we make assumptions.
Wow. Oh, yeah.
If others tell us something, we make assumptions. And if they don't tell us something, we make assumptions to fulfill our need to know and to replace the need to communicate. Even if we hear something and we don't understand, we make assumptions about what it means and then believe the assumptions. We make all sorts of assumptions because we don't have the courage to ask questions. That is so powerful.
Yeah, or take the time. We don't have the courage or the time.
Or the
I'm
time.
too busy, you know, I can't.
It's really, I feel like this is about, you know, as we wrap up here on the third agreement, is being present, right? And it is, like he even just says, saying this sounds easy, but it is difficult to do this. It's difficult because we so often do exactly the opposite. We make the assumptions. We're sort of hardwired to do that. And so this is almost like a rehabilitation of how we think and that paradigm we operate, and changing the habits and the routines of how we're constantly making assumptions about another person.
I love how you said that, the presence, right? And to me, presence is a lot about slowing down to really get a better, more objective view of what's going on. And like you said, like so beautifully, is just asking a question, right? Getting curious about it, right? The opposite of that is, you know, like an assumption is basically just a need to be right. It's a decision that's made that this is the way that it is, and that's the way that it is. And then, like he said, you know, you defend it to make sure that you protect it. But being curious about it, and you have to slow down to be curious.
You do have to slow down to be curious. Yeah. You know, the other thing that I just think about playfully is if you're assuming something horrible about another person or a situation, use the law of polarity and assume the exact opposite and get that beautiful image in your mind. Like if you're going to assume, you might as well assume the best and see that in your mind, in your heart, and go from the energy of that, because that's what you're going to create ultimately.
I love it. That's a very Kisma way to approach that. I love
Wrapping up, third agreement, don't make assumptions. Take this to heart, everyone. Think about it, slow down, breathe, ask really good questions, be courageous, because if you don't take things personally, what the heck? Ask some questions.
You got it.
We'll see you next week. We'll be closing out this series, The Four Agreements, and can't wait to see you then. Much love. Namaste.
Peace.
Hey, thanks for jamming with us today. And if you enjoy Illumination Podcast, please go ahead and share it with someone you love. Give us a rating, review, download our podcast. And remember, you can find us at illuminationacademy.net/podcasts. Talk to you soon. Namaste.